Welcome to a podcast about the adventures of a divorced entrepreneurial father. Now, this is a hub of stories, cautionary tales, and life lessons behind the daily struggle to do better and be better and ultimately to find new sparks in life. And even if no one listens to any of these episodes, but I leave something behind for my children that sparks something in or even for them, well, that's good enough for me. However, if you do like what you hear on SparkHub, please support us by linking to the show notes below each episode. And once you're there, please consider subscribing to this podcast on the platform of your choice. And for the best experience, our newsletter gives you the inside scoop, exclusive content, and advanced previews of what's coming next. And by the way, your data is always private with us. We don't sell it, and you can unsubscribe from all of that at any time you want without judgment. So let's begin. My name is Alan, and I have a heck of a story for you. I'm recording this episode a month after my 49th birthday, and as of yesterday, we're finally moved on as a family into our new homes. And for the first time, I have a live audience. It's a dog and a cat staring at me in my new home the day after we've all moved on. And it's been hell, to be honest with you. I feel like you'll see in a minute, figuratively fallen down a hill, and I've caught myself as I watch my own children have to grow up faster than I intended and really start to lose their innocence. And that's been tough. In this episode, I'm going to talk about all the torment I've gone through and see if it can lead to a better outcome, a better staging ground, as it were, for new and better things in life. I'm going to also talk about the ongoing quest, and it may never end, for truth and reconciliation in my own marriage and my own life. And truth and reconciliation was something that Nelson Mandela pioneered. And I also want to talk about what I learned from being a volunteer in Israel before I moved to the UK and everything that followed. In the speaker's notes linked below, I'll be putting pictures and videos that offer a deeper dive on this episode beyond the audio you're about to hear. Here we go. Okay, so I'd like to start with some numbers that will set some very, very crucial context. And some of you who've listened to other episodes will know this, but it's always worth a refresh. In lowest to highest, 9 is the number of years I've been an entrepreneur. 10 and 13 are the ages of my 2 sons in years right now. 17 is the number of months since my divorce was finalized in the family court. 17 is also the number of years old my pet cat is, or our pet cat. 20 is the number of months our marital home sat on the market before we could move on. 28 is the number of months my ex and I have been separated. 49 is the number of years old I turned just last month. 80-20 as a fraction is the current custody split that my ex and I have arranged in terms of time per month with the children in favor of my ex. And now I'm going to do a fraction. 0.3 is the miles that sat between my old marital home and where I'm living now, which is about 0.48 kilometers, but now we are about 4 miles apart. Now, all these numbers will make sense in a moment, except the pattern there is that everything took way longer than we thought. And many people last month or in the month leading up to a new year, they set New Year's resolutions. I've never really done that, except that my birthday is in January, and so I often take that time to reflect on where I was this time last year and see if I've moved forwards or backwards. And I also reflect on my brother, who had a birthday the day after mine, but we lost in 2014. And right now, I have no idea if I'm moving backwards or forwards or up or down or sideways, but there's a little spark forming, a kernel, around a staging ground. And I was recently reading that there's sort of 4 pillars in life that should be balanced for success in anything in life. There's a mental health pillar, a physical health pillar, a financial health pillar, and a spiritual health pillar. Across the board, and I'm self-assessing here, and I am hard on myself, I don't feel like I'm doing very well on any of those pillars, given the numbers you just heard at the top of the episode. And in fact, a few months ago, I talked about the first panic attack I ever suffered. And the result of which is I went to see a doctor who told me I have high blood pressure. They wanted to medicate me, but I said, I'm not going to do meds. Let's just wait until after I move out, get my own place. Give me a bit of time, and then let's retake the readings and make a call. In fact, symbolically, I've sort of tumbled down a hill. What do I mean by that? Well, my ex and I first lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment in London next to a really loud train line when we first got together. Then we scored a really amazing rental in London's sought-after Islington area, which is where we were dinks, double income, no kids, working London professionals. We got married. We had our first child in London, and then we moved to a suburb called Chingford, which is on the outskirts of London, and we became homeowners for the first time. So new parents, new homeowners. And as I recall, after we spent every penny we had on the deposit for the home and moving in, we had about £2,000 left in the bank, and then the boiler broke, and it cost £2,000 to replace. And it was sort of our welcome to home ownership. About 18 months later, our home was worth a lot more than we paid for it, so we sold at a profit. We moved way out to Essex in the countryside, and I'd say including our London home, we would go on to renovate 3 homes total in 6 years and have a second child, and we ended up in a beautiful country home. Literally, we leaped up the property ladder together, and all of that before, about 2 years before COVID hit, and then everything changed after that. As I record this, we've just moved out of our 4-bedroom detached home on a large plot of land, and my ex has moved down the road to a busy town nearby, and I've moved literally down the road 3.5 miles, about 500 meters, and I've managed to rent a 2-bedroom cottage where I'll be living alone with a 17-year-old cat that we first bought together when we lived in the small flat in London. And except for it'll only get busy when I host my children and my family dog. So when I say I'm tumbling down a hill, it's because symbolically, we fought our way up the property ladder. And now for the first time in 13 years, I won't be in a mortgaged marital home with 2 pets and 2 children. I'm a renter again, come full circle. And before I go deeper on how all that makes me feel and what I hope lies ahead, I want to first reflect on something that someone I admire did in a dark hour, and then reflect on a trip I took to the Holy Land before I moved to the UK and, well, I guess generated all the stats you just heard at the beginning of the episode. So the first reflection is about a man called Nelson Mandela, and he was the president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. And before that, he famously spent 27 years in prison, which I think is about a third of his lifetime on Earth. Mr. Mandela is famous for being the country's first black democratically elected head of state at the end of apartheid, which was racial segregation. And if the history books are true, instead of seeking revenge on the oppressing class against the oppressed people of his own skin color, he focused instead on racial reconciliation and dismantling apartheid. And it was called Truth and Reconciliation. And I just want to read a statement of intent about this historic play. The South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission aimed to facilitate a peaceful transition to democracy by investigating apartheid-era human rights violations, fostering national unity, and promoting, and I love this word, restorative rather than retributive justice. It provided a platform for victims to share their stories and granted amnesty to perpetrators who fully disclosed their crimes. The key intents and objectives of the Commission included uncovering the truth, promoting reconciliation and healing, restorative justice, reparation and rehabilitation, and I love this bit, preventing future violations. I'm going to stop at the intent part, and I just want to note that I've never been to South Africa, nor do I know if Truth and Reconciliation made anything better. But I love the concept. I love the way it was framed. And now I'm going to change lanes to talk about somewhere I've been that had a profound impact on me, and that was Israel. And specifically my time there for a few weeks in 2005, just before I moved to the UK, thinking I'd only be in the UK for 2 years maximum. Life happens when you're making plans, right? I grew up in a very mixed society in Montreal. I was surrounded by all kinds of skin tones and religions and food and everything. And the only thing we had in common was, like my parents, their parents came to Canada to start a new life. And many of my friends were Jewish or are Jewish, and some of the more observant Jews used to call me their token goy, because if I was around any of those friends who were observing the Shabbat, the day of rest, I would be asked to do tasks that they couldn't do because they were observing Shabbat, and it was fine with me. I didn't mind any of it. It was great fun. My dad always joked that around the age of when I turned 13, I nearly sent him broke because I would attend so many bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, which is the coming of age, Jewish ceremony of coming of age for girls and boys. And it always meant stuffing cash into envelopes for the ceremony. I wasn't employed until a year later, but my dad had to front that cash, and so he always joked that I shouldn't have had so many Jewish friends at that age. And I used to listen to my Jewish friends talk about something called birthright, which was like a pilgrimage they took as Jewish teenagers to Israel, which was the Jewish state founded in 1948. And I need to disclaim here and now, I have no overt position or view on Israel or how it was founded or the politics of the past or the present moment. All I'm going to talk about is a little time in 2005 where I learned that non-Jewish people could volunteer on IDF, Israeli Defense Force, bases in exchange for room and board, and that because I had a good reputation among the Jewish community of the West Island of Montreal, and as you can tell, I'm very curious, at that time I applied to go over to Israel alongside a Christian friend of mine to see the country we were both curious about for very different reasons. I will declare I'm not a religious person, but my friend was and is. And so we went for different reasons. But all to say, it worked well because we lived on an IDF base in volunteer barracks. We had bunk beds. We were fed 3 square meals a day in their canteen, and we were given a uniform to wear when we were on duty. And then off duty, we could come and go as we pleased. We could dress how we wanted. And the base we were on was near a place called Haifa. And regardless, getting around Israel isn't that hard. The country's so small. So when you're off duty, you within minutes or within hours, you can pretty much go anywhere within Israel. And it's so diverse. Now, the duties that we did were dull. Peeling potatoes, stacking uniforms, cleaning, moving things around, setting up bunk beds, whatever. But once we were off duty, my friend and I floated in the Dead Sea. We played tourist. We went to visit holy sites and locations while enjoying amazing food and drink and dance and making lots of new friends and memories. And the benefit of having friends who are soldiers is that they could take you to things that nobody else gets to see. So when tourists go, for example, to Jerusalem to see the Wailing Wall, we got to go behind the scenes and see parts of the Wailing Wall that weren't accessible to the public because a soldier knew how to knock on the right door with the right rhythm and get us in. So lots of memories there, and I did get in a slight bit of trouble because I'm very quick at what I do and I always finished my tasks early. So what should take a day, sometimes I did get done in an hour or two. And this commander pulled me aside and he said I needed to slow down. And he told me, because most of the soldiers here are in the military for 2 to 3 years minimum, they need to pace themselves. So don't make them look bad. Take as many smoke breaks as you want, as many prayer breaks as necessary. Just play the game. And that was a life lesson I learned then. But it was also an insight into something I never had to do. I never had to serve mandatory time in the army at the age of 18. And I believed at the time, women did 2 years of mandatory service and men did 3. I could be wrong, but I seem to remember those were the numbers. And a Jewish person was assessed in high school and was assigned to the Navy, the Army, or the intelligence branches of the IDF, depending on how they scored on the test they took in high school. And to avoid mandatory military service in Israel altogether, you either had to be devoutly religious, disabled, or at the opposite end of the spectrum, you were some kind of genius in industry and they would scoop you up to work on specific things. Generally, the majority of Israelis ended up on a base like me in uniform, except I was a volunteer, of course, and that's the difference. Anyway, at this time in my life, I was just a curious guy pushing a mop, just to be able to have that experience and eat for free and sleep for free and get an insight into what is one of the most intense countries on earth. And to say that Israel has too much history on too little real estate barely scratches the surface of how complex this part of the world is. Not only did my friend and I get to experience the day-to-day of Israeli soldiers, which is actually a large mix of boredom punctuated by brief moments of heightened stress. I learned from another commander that at the time, Israel's biggest problem wasn't war, it was bad press, it was media wars, it was perception. And the IDF commander used to say to me, "No Jews, no news." He would explain that so much of the opposing narrative was, in his opinion, staged. And when I asked him what he meant by that, he said, for example, news footage showing, apparently horrific acts committed by the IDF was actually staged and produced by opposing forces and passed off as credible news, what today we might call fake news. And I can't attest if anything he said was true. I'm not qualified to, but that was 2005. This is before the iPhone came out, before social media was launched. And 21 years later, you can now add artificial intelligence in, and I can see how all of this just gets worse. The perception wars aren't improving. Now, the other thing this commander said that I'll never forget is that if you were a quote-unquote frontline journalist in Israel from any other country, it was the easiest job on earth because you could be sipping a beautiful latte on a beach or in a European-style cafe in Tel Aviv and then drive a short distance, put on a flak jacket, roll a camera, shoot a report from the front lines of conflict, pack up, and be back in time for a lovely sunset dinner in your choice of several fine restaurants. Or if you were a journalist who was a writer or a photographer, you could go to anywhere, a scene, call it. You could then have a 5-star meal minutes later while you wrote up your submission or edited your photos. It seemed everywhere in Israel is the front line. And it's just bizarre. I mean, once I stayed with a friend who lived in Tel Aviv, and from his balcony, I could see both borders of the country. I could see the sea one way, and in the opposite direction, I could see the glimmering lights of the West Bank. And in between was where he lived. And finally, I'll never forget riding public transport. This sounds like a joke, but it isn't. You get on the bus, and there'd be 3 characters. There'd be a young girl, maybe 18 or 19 years old, in full IDF uniform, hair tied back, holding a grenade launcher and lots of ammunition. And she'd be talking to her friend, a girl of the same age, but this girl was wearing a bikini, holding a boogie board and listening to Walkman, like a surfer chick. And next to them was a Hasidic Jew, rocking back and forth feverishly, reading the Torah. It was just mind-boggling to see all of that, but that wrapped up what Israel was like. It was this land of the free and the land of the religious all jammed next to each other. And I'm not qualified to pass judgment on something as complex as Israel. But the one thing I can see is that Israel has been under more scrutiny than any other country since 1948, good or bad. And that's a lot of heat, whoever you are. I always wonder if Israel, like South Africa and even recently Canada and Australia in regards to Aboriginal matters, would benefit from its own brand of truth and reconciliation and trying to prevent things in the future. But let's come back to the present, because presently I'm sitting here with my animals in silence. Actually, the birds are chirping, but close enough. And I've been in this place now for just over a week. And I wake up around 5 a.m. each day thinking I need to get up, get the kids up, get the dog up, heat the house, stack the laundry, feed the kids, get ready for school, sort the house, get ready for work. And now it's just me and the cat and sometimes the dog. And right now I feel like my children have lost a lot of innocence and key years of childhood, and it's really heartbreaking. And over the past 48 hours, and in the lead up a few weeks before that, they've had to watch all their lives boxed up or given to charity or transported to landfill. And in the show notes below, you can see some of the photos I'm going to share of the process. And I can't help but wonder what damage this has done to them. And I couldn't do anything about it. Now, our dog is following me around endlessly, as if she's scared to lose sight of me. And when I stroke her, she's very tense. And she's watched her whole pack split, pack animals, and they don't like it. In the coming days, we're going to have to get used to shuttling children between homes instead of returning to their stable home. And I've had to learn the quirks of this new cottage I'm living in. It's got low ceilings. The floors are on an angle. Put water on my nightstand and it slid off. How the heating works. I had to get new appliances. I had no mobile signal, no internet for 2 days. In the silence, I did start to listen to my own inner thoughts, trying to find a form of truth and reconciliation in so many ways. And here's kind of what's swirling. After I suffered my panic attack last year, someone asked me when the last time was that I felt truly happy, and the answer came easily. It was the summer of 2023. My oldest son was graduating elementary school, and having lost out on so much travel since COVID 3 years before, we finally got on a plane and went to Canada and the US. Then my wife called me her rock, and we were making all kinds of ambitious plans together. But by October 2023, which was literally 6 weeks later, we were separated. And maybe in the future I can delve more into that, but it's not pertinent right now. And I feel all I can say is after the separation, I felt like my life went into free fall. Why did I deserve this? Why did my children have to endure that nearly 2 years of living with separated parents under the same roof? How did my ex and I fight our way from a crappy little flat in London to the top of a hill in a beautiful village, only to have to sit our children down one day and tell them why mommy and daddy were splitting? And the most heart-wrenching moment from that was when my oldest son screamed, ran out the room crying, and couldn't understand why my ex and I, who both have parents who are still married, weren't going to give them the stability our parents gave them for the rest of his life. What do you say to that? How do you reconcile 16 years of ups and downs and marriage and kids and businesses and starting companies, and in all of that finding any truth, let alone closure? Then in divorce with children, there's only really one question you have to focus on, and there seems to be multiple answers and points of escalation, but it's what is in the best interests of the children: emotional, financial, legal. I still don't see how it all lines up, but there are a few things that have happened in this process that give me hope. I once sold a small freezer to a man named Rob on Facebook Marketplace, and we became friends. He actually owns a workshop down the road from where I used to live, and we're working together now on some entrepreneurial endeavors. But because I met Rob, I didn't have to pay any movers. Rob brought me a flatbed truck, and a few friends and I moved my stuff down the road. The day I was moving into my new place, the neighbors came to meet me from both sides and offered me help, including some lovely fireplace dinners when I had no food. And I will be forever grateful to them for that, as well as anything else they offered for the house. Another good friend of mine clears homes, and he suddenly said, "Hey, I've got all these appliances and cabinetry and stuff. All of the above would have cost me a fortune, and I got it for free." I received a handcrafted welcome card and some other home-warming gifts. And my youngest son came to stay a night. All I could offer him was a mattress on the floor, and I would go next to him on a camping bed. And bearing in mind that his fully stocked bedroom was only 500 meters away, he, me, the dog, and the cat all slept in the same room, and he said he loved the basics. He loved going back to basics, which made me feel so amazing and gave me hope. Everything was stripped back, and we still had a good night. Then, and you can't make this up, yesterday, which is the day my ex moved to her new home among a hurricane of movers, I was rushing up and down the hill, trying to do as many things as possible, and a massive truck pulled up, and basically 3 pallets of rain product, and that's the well-being company I co-founded, arrived early. Worst timing ever, and the pallets didn't fit down my driveway, so I had to divert to sort that. But I took it as a sign that one of my startups was about to grow. I don't know how long I'll live here, but I feel now that I have a staging ground to transform many things, and I see potential for the first time in a long time. I look at the mess around me right now and I think, actually, what if this is a blank canvas? What will I paint? Could I transform my life, my businesses, and I hope the lives of those around me that I care about, and obviously, most importantly, my children. So now I think in terms of perspective and potential, and I still haven't reconciled so many things in my own mind, and there is so much truth I probably never know, or frankly never got to tell my children because of their age, and I just hope one day they'll know and see what really happened without the spin, but all that's out of my control. Perception is reality, and I'm dealing with so many strange perceptions right now, and I hate to admit it, my children now come from a broken home, which I never intended, and it's a burden I feel every day. And I don't know if I can build them a better world and more opportunities, but I can try. Just like Nelson Mandela did. He didn't seek revenge. He sought truth and reconciliation. He sought to build a better foundation for whatever came next and prevent mistakes of the past, even though he was locked up for a third of his life. As for my time in Israel before I moved to the UK and got married and started a family, I still think about the commander who talked to me about PR problems and image issues and stigmatization. It's one of the biggest front lines in a never-ending war that happens there. And maybe there'll never be peace. I hope not. But personally, I'm going to think hard about how to recalibrate my own mental, physical, and spiritual pillars of life. I might even have to do it solo. But in the military, they always talk about staging grounds, places where you set up to launch campaigns from with objectives and success or failure. And maybe that's just what this new home of mine is. It's a staging ground. And right now, that's the best I can do. And let's see what sparks next. Thank you for listening. To support SparkHub, please have a look at the show notes below this episode or visit thesparkhub.com to sign up for our newsletter, which offers exclusive inside scoops. Just quickly, the music you're hearing is composed by Shi Hao-Yan, and the audio engineering is done by Emily Chung. My name is Alan, and I hope that you dream big and something sparked in you today.